Commander Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around the massive space station. Nexus Prime was bigger than anything he had ever seen. The walls stretched up so high he could not see the top. Thousands of different aliens walked through the halls. Some looked like walking crystals, others floated like gas clouds, and a few had tentacles instead of arms. "This place is incredible," said Lieutenant Amy Parker as she walked beside him. She carried a datapad with information about all the different species they might meet. Morrison nodded. He was here to ask the Galactic Defense Coalition if humans could join their group. Earth had been sending messages to space for years, but this was the first time they got an answer back. The aliens wanted to meet humans in person before they made any decisions. Dr. Ben Clark joined them as they walked toward the meeting hall. He was excited to see all the alien technology. "Look at those robots," he said, pointing to a group of metal soldiers marching past them. "They must be 12 feet tall. The robots belonged to a species called the Quarians. They looked like living rocks but built machines to do their fighting." Morrison watched the robots move in perfect formation. Every step was exactly the same. Every turn happened at exactly the right time. "Very impressive," Parker said. "No human army could march that perfectly." They reached the main meeting hall where hundreds of aliens sat in a giant circle. In the center was a raised platform where different species were showing off their military forces. Morrison and his team found seats near the back and watched. Tall, thin alien made of what looked like purple gas spoke first. "The Ethereal Defense Corps presents our nano-swarm units," it said in a voice that sounded like wind. Thousands of tiny robots flew into the air above the platform. They moved like a school of fish, changing direction all at once. When they came together, they formed the shape of a giant warrior. The audience made sounds of approval. Some aliens clapped, others whistled, and a few made clicking noises. Next came the Depth Dwellers. They looked like giant squid, but walked on land using mechanical legs. Their robots were built for underwater fighting. The machines were round and smooth, with propellers instead of arms. "These units can fight at depths of 30,000 meters, their speaker announced proudly. More species took turns showing their robots. Each one was different, but they were all machines. Morrison began to understand something important. Every single species in the galaxy used robots to fight their wars. No one sent living soldiers into battle anymore. Why would anyone risk real lives when machines can do the fighting? Parker whispered to him. Before Morrison could answer, a crystalline alien approached their seats. This was Zethkari, the Supreme War Coordinator for the entire coalition. Its body looked like a walking diamond, and its voice sounded like breaking glass. "Commander Morrison," Zethkari said, "we are ready to hear about human military capabilities. Please come to the platform." Morrison felt hundreds of alien eyes watching him as he walked to the center of the hall. The platform was bigger up close, with speakers that would carry his voice to every corner of the room. "Honored members of the coalition," Morrison began. "Humans thank you for this opportunity. We hope to join your alliance and help defend the galaxy." Yes, Zethkari interrupted. "But tell us about your robotic forces. What makes human machines special?" Morrison paused. This was the moment he had been worried about. "We don't use robots for fighting," he said simply. The hall became completely quiet. Morrison could hear the hum of the station's air systems. "I do not understand," Zethkari said. "How do you conduct warfare without mechanical soldiers?" "Humans fight our own battles," Morrison replied. "We train our people to be soldiers. We give them weapons and send them to fight." The silence continued for several seconds. Then aliens began talking all at once. Some sounded confused, others sounded worried. A few made angry noises. "This is unacceptable," shouted a representative from the Depth Dwellers. "No civilized species risks real lives in combat." "It makes no logical sense," added a Quarian. "Organic beings feel fear. They make mistakes. They die permanently." Zethkari raised one crystalline hand for silence. "Commander Morrison, surely you understand the advantages of mechanical soldiers. They do not feel pain or fear. They follow orders perfectly. They can be repaired if damaged." Morrison looked around the hall at all the alien faces staring at him. "Humans understand fear," he said. But we also understand courage. Our soldiers think for themselves. They adapt to new situations. They protect each other not because they are programmed to, but because they choose to. Primitive, muttered someone in the audience. Inefficient, said another. Dr. Clark stood up from his seat. If I may, he called out. Human soldiers have advantages that machines cannot match. We learn from experience. We can improvise when plans fail. We have intuition. Intuition is not reliable, Zethkari replied. Logic and programming are superior to organic guesswork. Before the argument could continue, red lights began flashing throughout the station. A loud alarm filled the air. Emergency announcements echoed from speakers in dozens of different languages. Zethkari's crystalline body began glowing brighter. Coalition defense alert, it announced. The Vexthul have launched attacks on 3 outer rim colonies. All automated defense systems have been compromised. Electronic warfare capabilities exceed our current countermeasures. The hall erupted in chaos. Aliens were shouting in languages Morrison could not understand. Some were already running toward the exits. Others were talking rapidly into communication devices. Morrison learned that the Vexthul were the Coalition's greatest enemy. They had been fighting this Cold War for over 200 years. The Vexthul were a hive mind species that could hack into any computer system. They were experts at turning the Coalition's own robots against them. All robotic forces in the affected sectors have been compromised, Zethkari announced. The enemy has gained control of our defense networks. Evacuation of civilian populations is proceeding, but slowly. Morrison stepped forward. His voice cut through the noise in the hall. Give us a ship and coordinates, he said loudly. We'll handle this the human way. The hall became quiet again. Every alien was staring at him. You would send organic soldiers against the Vexthul? Zethkari asked in disbelief. Our people can't be hacked, Morrison replied. Our weapons don't rely on computer networks. Give us a chance to show you what humans can do. Parker and Clark moved to stand beside their commander. Other human personnel who had been scattered throughout the station began making their way toward the platform. This is madness, whispered a Depth Dweller representative. It might be suicide, added Aquarian. But Zethkari was thinking. The Coalition's robotic armies were offline. Civilian populations were trapped on 3 different worlds. Traditional solutions had failed. Very well, Zethkari said finally. We will provide you with 1 frigate-class vessel and full tactical information. But understand this, Commander Morrison. If your organic soldiers fail, those worlds will be lost. Morrison nodded grimly. We understand the stakes. Humans don't abandon people who need help. As emergency crews prepared a ship for the human mission, word spread throughout Nexus Prime. The crazy Deathworlders were going to fight the Vexthul with nothing but flesh and blood soldiers. Most aliens thought it was hopeless. But Morrison had a feeling that the galaxy was about to learn something new about warfare, something that no robot could ever understand. Captain Lisa Chen stood on the bridge of the human ship Earthbound and looked at the planet below. New Harmony was supposed to be a peaceful farming world, but now smoke rose from burning cities. The Vexthul had been attacking for 6 days, and the planet's robot defenders were all offline. Captain, we're getting a signal from the surface, said tech specialist Alex Turner from his station. It's weak, but someone down there is still alive. Chen nodded. Behind her, 200 human soldiers were getting ready for their first battle against an alien enemy. They wore simple combat gear and carried weapons that fired bullets instead of energy beams. The Coalition observers on the ship thought the humans looked primitive. Those are projectile weapons, said Aquarian military expert watching the soldiers through a window. Very inefficient. Energy weapons would be much more effective. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez was checking his rifle when he heard the alien comment. This old thing has never let me down, he said, patting his weapon. It works even when the power goes out. The Quarian made a sound like grinding stone, which meant it was confused. Why would the power go out? All modern weapons have backup power systems. What happens when someone hacks your backup power? Asked Private Kate Williams. She was young and nervous about her first real combat mission. But she had trained hard for this moment. The alien had no answer for that question. Commander Morrison's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Listen up, people. The enemy, down there, can take control of any computer system. That means our fancy equipment won't work once they start jamming us. You'll be fighting with basic gear only." Chen began the landing sequence. The Earthbound was not built for atmospheric flight, but human engineers had modified it during the trip. They used spare parts and creative thinking to make it work. The Coalition engineers were amazed that the modifications held together. "Human engineering is very unusual," observed an ethereal scientist. "Its gas-like body was contained in a special suit so it could observe the mission safely." "We call it making do with what we have," Chen replied as the ship shook during entry into the planet's atmosphere. The landing zone was a field outside the capital city. Smoke and fire covered the horizon. Strange mechanical shapes moved between the buildings. These were Vexthul biomechanical drones, part machine and part living tissue. "Remember your training," Rodriguez told his squad as they prepared to leave the ship. "These things can hack electronics, but they can't hack your brain. Trust your instincts." The soldiers ran down the ship's ramp and immediately spread out across the field. This was basic infantry tactics that humans had used for centuries. The aliens watching from the ship expected them to form neat lines like robot soldiers would. "Their formation is chaotic," noted the Quarian expert. "No organization at all." "It's not chaos," Morrison replied from the observation deck. "It's adaptation. Watch and learn." The first Vexthul drones appeared at the edge of the field. They looked like metal spiders the size of cars, with glowing red sensors for eyes. When they detected the human soldiers, they immediately started jamming all electronic signals in the area. Rodriguez's radio went dead. His night vision goggles stopped working. Even his digital watch shut down. But his rifle still fired and his eyes still worked fine. "Just like training," he called to his squad. "Old school rules now." The Vexthul drones had never fought enemies who could function without electronics. Their hacking abilities were useless against human eyes and ears. When they tried to predict human movements using computer models, the soldiers did unexpected things that no program could calculate. Williams saw a drone trying to flank her position. Instead of following standard military doctrine, she did something her training sergeant had taught her during survival exercises. She used the terrain to her advantage, rolling behind a fallen tree and using the drone's own movement to line up a perfect shot. "The human soldiers are not following any recognizable tactical patterns," the ethereal scientist observed from the ship. "That's the point," Chen said. "Predictable tactics can be countered. Unpredictable tactics cannot." More drones emerged from the city. These were larger and more heavily armed. They had been programmed to fight coalition robot armies, so they used tactics that worked against mechanical opponents. But humans moved differently than robots. They took cover behind things that robots would ignore. They attacked from angles that computer models said were impossible. Tech specialist Turner had been watching the battle from the ship, and he noticed something important. "Captain, the Vexthul drones are trying to communicate with each other using radio frequencies, but they're having trouble coordinating their attacks." "Why?" Chen asked. "Because they can't predict what our people will do next," Turner explained. "Their battle computers need predictable patterns to work properly. Human tactics are too random for their systems to handle." Down on the surface, Rodriguez's squad had discovered something else. The planet's mineral deposits created natural, electromagnetic interference. The Vexthul avoided certain areas because the interference made their systems malfunction. But humans could fight in those areas without any problems. "Private Williams," Rodriguez called out. "Take your team through that rocky area. The enemy can't follow us there." Williams led her soldiers through terrain that would have disabled any robot force. The rocks contained metals that created electrical fields. The Vexthul drones stopped at the edge of the area and waited for the humans to come out. But the humans didn't come out. They used the protected area as a base to launch surprise attacks. They would strike fast and then disappear back into the electromagnetic interference before the drones could respond. Dr. Ben Clark was monitoring the battle from the ship's medical bay. He had been studying the Vexthul during the fight and made an important discovery. These creatures are not fully organic, he told Morrison over the communication system. They're hybrids, part biological, part mechanical. That's why they can interface with computer systems so easily. But it's also their weakness, Morrison realized. They think like computers because they partly are computers. The battle continued. For hours, human soldiers used tactics that no robot army had ever tried. They improvised weapons from debris. They used the environment as a tool. Most importantly, they worked together in ways that no programmed system could match. When one soldier was wounded, others immediately moved to help. This was not because they were programmed to do so, but because they cared about each other. The Vexthul drones could not understand this behavior. Their computer models had no explanation for soldiers who would risk their lives to save a teammate. By the end of the day, Rodriguez's unit had cleared the landing zone and established a secure perimeter. They had destroyed dozens of Vexthul drones while losing none of their own people. The aliens on the ship could not believe what they had witnessed. Impossible, whispered the Quarian expert. Organic soldiers cannot be more effective than mechanical ones. Today they were, Chen replied. But their celebration was short-lived. Turner's sensors detected something troubling in deep space. A massive fleet of Vexthul ships was approaching the system. This force was 10 times larger than anything the Coalition had ever faced. Captain, Turner said quietly, we have a problem. A big one. Chen looked at the sensor readings and felt her heart sink. The human soldiers had won their first battle, but the real war was just beginning, and they were about to face odds that seemed impossible, even for humans. The massive Vexthul fleet arrived 3 days later. Colonel Sam Brooks watched from his command ship as enemy vessels spread across the Theta sector like a dark cloud. There were more ships than he could count, each one bristling with weapons that could destroy entire cities. Sir, we're getting reports from all over the sector, said his communications officer. The enemy is attacking 6 different worlds at the same time. Brooks studied the tactical display. The Coalition's remaining robot armies were still offline from the cyber attacks. Only human forces were available to respond, and they were badly outnumbered. Split our forces, Brooks ordered. Send teams to each world under attack. Small groups, fast-moving. We can't match their numbers, so we'll have to be smarter. On the industrial moon of Pharaoh 7, Corporal Tony Martinez led his squad through the abandoned mining tunnels. The Vexthul had taken control of the moon's automated systems, turning the mining robots into weapons. But they had not expected humans to use the tunnels themselves as a battleground. These passages were built for machines, said one of Martinez's soldiers. They're too narrow for us. Then we make them wider, Martinez replied, pulling out explosive charges. He had learned demolition work in Earth's military, where soldiers had to destroy bridges and buildings to stop enemy advances. The techniques worked just as well on alien structures. The explosion shook the entire tunnel system. When the dust settled, Martinez's squad had created a new passage that led directly to the moon's main power facility. The Vexthul had not programmed their defenses for this approach, because no robot army would have thought to blow up the tunnels. Meanwhile, on the jungle world of Verdant 3, Dr. Nina Foster was dealing with a different kind of problem. Her medical unit had been cut off from the main force while treating wounded Coalition soldiers. The jungle was filled with poisonous plants and dangerous animals that made it deadly for most alien species. We cannot survive in this environment, said a wounded Quarian soldier. Its crystalline body was already showing cracks from the toxic air. Yes, you can, Foster replied, applying a breathing mask she had improvised from medical supplies. You just need to adapt. Foster had grown up in the Amazon rainforest on Earth, where her parents were medical researchers. She knew how to survive in hostile environments. The skills she learned as a child were now keeping alien soldiers alive on a world that should have killed them. How do you know which plants are safe? Asked an ethereal medic, whose gas-like body was contained in a protective suit that was running low on power. Experience, Foster said simply. On Earth, we learn to read the signs. This plant has the wrong color leaves. That one smells dangerous. This water is safe to drink because insects are living in it. The ethereal medic was amazed. Your people memorize the characteristics of every dangerous organism? We don't memorize them, Foster explained while bandaging another wound. We learn to recognize patterns. Our brains are good at seeing things that don't belong. Back at Coalition headquarters, alien scientists were studying reports from the human battles. Dr. Rachel Kim, a xenobiologist, was explaining her findings to the Coalition leadership. We have discovered why humans fight so differently, she announced to the assembled aliens. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. It is one of the most dangerous planets known to support complex life. The alien leaders made sounds of surprise. Most of them came from peaceful worlds where the biggest threat was bad weather. Humans evolved alongside creatures that could kill them, Dr. Kim continued. Their planet has natural disasters, diseases, predators, and environmental hazards that would destroy most species. They developed survival skills that no other race possesses. Seth Kari, the crystalline war coordinator, was beginning to understand. This explains their unusual combat effectiveness. They are adapted for survival in impossible conditions. Exactly, Dr. Kim said. They can function under extreme stress because they evolved in extreme conditions. They can adapt quickly because adaptation meant survival on their world. They can think creatively because rigid thinking would have gotten them killed. On Pharaoh 7, Martinez's squad had reached the power facility and discovered something important. The Vexthul were not just hacking the mining robots, they were upgrading them. The enemy was learning from their defeats and creating new weapons designed to fight humans. These robots are different, Martinez observed, watching the new machines through his scope. They're not moving in patterns anymore, they're trying to be unpredictable. But the Vexthul's attempts at unpredictability were still limited by their computer-based thinking. They could simulate randomness, but they could not truly embrace chaos. Martinez noticed that their random movements still followed mathematical patterns. They're trying to think like us, he told his squad, but they're still thinking like machines pretending to be random. Martinez used this knowledge to predict where the upgraded robots would move next. His squad set traps in locations that looked random but were actually based on the mathematical patterns the Vexthul were using. Back on Verdant 3, Foster's medical unit was making their way through the jungle toward the extraction point. They carried wounded soldiers from 6 different species moving through terrain that would kill most galactic life forms. How much farther? Asked the wounded Quarian, whose breathing mask was fogging up in the humid air. Not far, Foster replied, though she was not entirely sure herself. The jungle looked the same in every direction. But she was using navigation skills her grandfather had taught her during camping trips, reading the position of the sun through the canopy, noticing which side of trees had more moss, following the sound of running water. These were techniques that no GPS system could replicate and no computer could understand. They were based on thousands of years of human experience in natural environments. The group reached a clearing where they could finally see the sky. Foster's communicator crackled to life as they moved out of the jungle's interference. "This is Extraction Team," came a voice through the static. "We have your location, but we have a problem. Vexthul ships are jamming the area. We can't land." Foster looked around the clearing and spotted a solution that no military manual would have suggested. "Can you drop supplies instead of landing?" "Affirmative." "What do you need?" "Rope and metal stakes," Foster replied. "Lots of rope." The other soldiers looked at her in confusion, but Foster was already planning. She was going to use rock climbing techniques to get her patients to safety. It was not standard military procedure, but it would work. An hour later, Foster was rappelling down a cliff face with a wounded alien strapped to her back. It was something no robot medic would have attempted, and something no other species would have thought possible. "Humans," muttered the Quarian as they descended. "You are all completely insane." "Thank you," Foster replied cheerfully. As reports came in from all the battle zones, one thing became clear to the coalition leadership. Humans were not just different. They represented a completely new way of thinking about warfare and survival. They were chaos, given intelligence and purpose. But the Vexthul were learning too, and the real test was still coming. General Peter Hayes stood in the coalition war room, looking at the holographic display that showed the entire theta sector. Red dots marked Vexithol positions, while blue dots showed human forces. There were far more red dots than blue ones. The enemy is adapting faster than we expected, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Murphy, who had just returned from a space battle near the asteroid belt. Their new ships don't follow the old attack patterns. They're trying to copy our tactics. Hayes nodded grimly. The Vexthol had been studying human combat methods for weeks now. They were creating hybrid biomechanical units that combined their technological advantages with limited organic unpredictability. But something about their adaptations felt wrong. They're still thinking like machines, observed Master Sergeant Carlos Johnson, who had been fighting ground battles across 3 different worlds. They can copy what we do, but they don't understand why we do it. Dr. Rachel Kim entered the war room carrying a data pad full of research notes. Her findings about human evolution had helped explain their combat effectiveness, but now she had discovered something more disturbing. "General, I need to show you something," she said, activating a holographic display. "We've been analyzing captured Vexthol technology, and we found something unexpected." The display showed a biological scan of a Vexthol drone. The creature looked like a mixture of metal and flesh, but the organic parts were highlighted in red. "These aren't naturally evolved beings," Dr. Kim explained. "The organic components show signs of artificial modification. They used to be fully biological, but they replaced parts of themselves with machines." Hayes studied the scan carefully. "Are you saying they chose to become part machine?" "More than that," Dr. Kim replied. "They eliminated the parts of their brains that create unpredictable behavior. They removed their capacity for true creativity and chaos in pursuit of perfect efficiency." The room became quiet as everyone understood what this meant. The Vexthol represented what humanity could become if they abandoned their organic nature for technological perfection. "They're what we might turn into," Johnson said slowly, "if we gave up being human." This revelation came at a difficult time. The Coalition had been offering to enhance human soldiers with robotic augmentations to help them fight more effectively. The technology would make humans stronger, faster, and more durable. Many human commanders were considering accepting the upgrades. "General," said Commander Ellen Davis, who led the human naval forces, "the Coalition is pressuring us to accept their enhancement technology. They say our casualty rates are too high." Hayes looked around the room at his officers. They were tired and injured from weeks of constant fighting. The temptation to accept technological help was strong. "What would we lose if we accepted the upgrades?" and he asked Dr. Kim. "Our unpredictability," she replied without hesitation. "The enhancements would make you more efficient, but they would also make you more predictable. You would think more like machines and less like humans." Hayes made a decision that would affect the entire war. "We decline the augmentations, we stay human." The choice proved to be crucial during the Battle of Abyssal Prime, an ocean world where the fighting moved underwater. The high-pressure environment should have been impossible for humans to survive, but Sergeant Johnson's unit found a way. "These old diving suits weren't designed for combat," complained one of his soldiers as they descended toward an underwater Vexthol base. "Then we make them work for combat," Johnson replied, showing his team how to modify their equipment using spare parts and creative thinking. They turned scientific diving gear into makeshift armor and weapons. The Vexthol had expected any underwater attack to come from specialized robotic units. They had not prepared for human soldiers who could adapt civilian equipment for military use. Johnson's team swam through areas that robots could not reach and attacked from angles that the enemy's computer models said were impossible. Meanwhile, Commander Davis was revolutionizing space combat tactics. Human pilots were flying their ships in ways that violated standard Coalition procedures, but their unconventional methods were working. "You're flying too close to that asteroid field," warned a Quarian flight controller. "Coalition safety protocols require a minimum distance of 50 kilometers. Human protocols require us to win the battle," Davis replied, steering her ship between asteroids that would have crushed any larger vessel. The Vexthol ships could not follow because their computer systems would not allow such dangerous maneuvers. "Davis, use the asteroid field as cover to launch surprise attacks," Her pilots treated space combat like aerial dogfighting, using techniques that human pilots had developed during Earth's wars. The Vexthul had no experience fighting this kind of chaotic, intuitive combat, but the enemy was learning. Intelligence. Reports showed that the Vexthul were developing new strategies specifically designed to counter human unpredictability. They were creating battle computers that could simulate chaos and randomness. They're building machines that can think like humans, Dr. Kim warned during a strategy meeting, but without the limitations that make us vulnerable. The test came during the Battle of Binary Station, a massive space platform orbiting twin stars. The Vexthul deployed their new adaptive units, which combined their technological advantages with simulated organic thinking. The battle was unlike anything humans had fought before. The enemy units moved unpredictably, but their unpredictability was calculated and precise. They could simulate creativity without the emotional costs that affected human decision-making. They're like us, but without fear or doubt, reported Captain Lisa Chen from the front lines. They take risks that would terrify human soldiers, but they don't hesitate or second-guess themselves. For the first time since the war began, human forces were being pushed back. The Vexthul's artificial chaos was proving effective against human adaptability. General Hayes watched the battle reports with growing concern. Human casualties were mounting, and their traditional advantages were being neutralized. The enemy had found a way to copy human unpredictability while eliminating human weaknesses. "Sir," said Commander Davis, "we're receiving communications from individual Vexthul units. They're trying to negotiate." This was unexpected. The Vexthul had never attempted diplomatic contact during battle before. "What are they saying?" Hayes asked. "They want to understand why we fight without technological enhancement. They say our approach is inefficient and causes unnecessary suffering." Hayes realized that the war had become more than a military conflict. It was a philosophical battle about the nature of consciousness itself. The Vexthul represented perfect order achieved through the elimination of chaos. Humans represented the power of chaos channeled through will and intelligence. "Tell them we fight this way because chaos is not a weakness to be eliminated," Hayes replied. "It's a strength to be embraced." But even as he spoke those words, Hayes knew that the final test was coming. The Vexthul were preparing their ultimate weapon, and humanity would have to prove that organic chaos could triumph over artificial perfection. The real war was just beginning. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earthbound, looking at the planet that had started it all. Nexus Void was the home world of the Vexthul, a planet that had been completely covered in metal and machines. No organic life remained on its surface. It was the heart of the enemy's collective consciousness. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the planet," reported tech specialist Alex Turner. "They're powering up something big." Morrison nodded. Intelligence reports suggested that the Vexthul were preparing their final weapon, a device that could turn any technology within 1,000 light-years into an extension of their hive mind. If they activated it, every ship, every computer, every advanced device in Coalition space would become their weapon. General Hayes, you ready?" Morrison asked over the communication system. "As ready as we can be," came Hayes's reply from the assault ship. "All human forces are in position. We've stripped out every piece of advanced technology we could find. We're going in with basic weapons in our own 2 hands." The plan was desperate and seemed impossible. Human forces would assault the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy, using nothing but primitive weapons and their natural abilities. They had abandoned all advanced technology to prevent the Vexthul from taking control of their equipment. "The Coalition thinks we're committing suicide," said Captain Lisa Chen, who commanded one of the assault groups. "Maybe they're right." "Maybe," Morrison replied. "But sometimes the impossible is the only option left." The assault began at dawn on Nexus Void. Human dropships, stripped of all computerized systems, crashed through the planet's atmosphere using nothing but basic navigation and pilot skill. The ships were essentially flying metal boxes with engines, but they got the job done. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez hit the ground running, his rifle in his hands and his squad behind him. The planet's surface was a maze of metal corridors and mechanical structures. Everything was controlled by the Vexthul Central Intelligence. "Remember, people," Rodriguez called to his soldiers. "They can control every machine on this planet except us. We are the weapon now." The Vexthul defenders were expecting a technological assault. Their defensive systems were designed to counter energy weapons, guided missiles, and robotic attackers. They were not prepared for humans armed with simple firearms and explosive charges. Private Kate Williams, now a veteran of many battles, led her team through a ventilation shaft that was too small for robotic defenders. "Just like the old days," she said to herself, remembering her first battle on New Harmony. The humans moved through the metal city like ghosts. They used maintenance tunnels, air shafts, and forgotten passages that the Vexthul had never thought to defend. They planted explosive charges in locations that no computer would have identified as critical. Dr. Nina Foster was with the medical team, but she was also carrying a rifle. Everyone was a soldier now. "How many wounded?" she asked, as her team moved through the battlefield. 40% casualties, reported Corporal Tony Martinez. "But we're still advancing." The cost was terrible. Humans were dying in numbers that would have been unacceptable in any previous conflict. But they kept moving forward because they understood what would happen if they failed. Deep in the planet's core, the human assault teams found the central control chamber. It was a massive room filled with biological computers, half-living machines that formed the brain of the Vexthul Collective. "This is it," said Colonel Sam Brooks, studying the alien technology. "Destroy this, and we cut off their coordination." But, as the humans prepared their charges, something unexpected happened. Some of the Vexthul defenders stopped fighting. They stood motionless, as if frozen by confusion. "What's happening to them?" asked Lieutenant Commander Sarah Murphy. Dr. Rachel Kim, who had joined the assault team, was scanning the affected Vexthul with a basic medical scanner. "They're remembering," she said in amazement. "Exposure to prolonged human chaos is triggering their suppressed organic memories." The Vexthul had eliminated their capacity for randomness, but they had not completely destroyed it. Deep in their biomechanical brains, traces of their original organic nature remained dormant. Human unpredictability was awakening these sleeping memories. "We don't have to destroy them," Morrison realized. "We can save them." The final battle became something no one had expected. Instead of destroying the Vexthul control center, the humans began dismantling the machines that suppressed the aliens' organic nature. It was delicate work that required intuition and creativity, rather than brute force. Master Sergeant Carlos Johnson found himself working alongside a Vexthul unit that had recovered some of its original personality. The alien creature was clumsy and confused, like someone learning to walk again after years of paralysis. "Why did you help us?" the Vexthul asked in a voice that sounded uncertain and afraid. "Because everyone deserves a chance to be themselves," Johnson replied. The victory came at a terrible price. More than half of the human forces were killed or wounded in the assault on Nexus Void. But they had accomplished something that seemed impossible. They had defeated the most technologically advanced civilization in the galaxy using nothing but courage and determination. More importantly, they had saved the Vexthul from themselves. Thousands of the alien beings began recovering their suppressed organic nature. They were no longer a perfect hive mind, but they were alive in a way they had not been for centuries. 5 years later, Commander Morrison stood in the Coalition Assembly, wearing the uniform of a Strategic Council member. The war was over, but its effects would last forever. "The humans have taught us something important," said Zethkari, the Crystalline War Coordinator. "Technology should serve consciousness, not replace it." The galaxy had changed. Other species began incorporating human-style thinking into their military doctrines. They could not replicate human chaos, but they learned to value unpredictability and creativity. Human training camps were established on dozens of worlds, teaching alien soldiers how to think outside the parameters of their programming. It was not about making them human, but about helping them find their own unique forms of organic thinking. Morrison watched new recruits training in the courtyard below his office. Humans and aliens worked together, learning from each other. The humans taught adaptation and creativity. The aliens shared their technological knowledge and logical thinking. "We lost a lot of good people," said General Hayes, who had joined. "Morrison at the window?" "Yes," Morrison replied. "But we proved something important. Chaos is not the enemy of order. They need each other." The galaxy was no longer divided between organic and mechanical thinking. Instead, it had learned to combine both approaches, creating something stronger than either could be alone. Humanity had earned its place not as the galaxy's greatest warriors, but as its reminder that consciousness, creativity, and chaos were not weaknesses to be eliminated. They were gifts to be treasured and protected. The Deathworlders had taught the galaxy how to live.